Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Welcome to this video. I'm excited for this one. For anyone who doesn't know this channel and they clicked on this video because they saw the words Porter Robinson, welcome. Welcome for the first time. I'm Alex. Most of my videos are about books, but this is a piece of art that it's been affecting me for the last couple weeks here. So I'm gonna talk about it. For anyone who's been subscribed, welcome back. Good to see you again. I do have more book videos on the way. I swear I am still reading. Now, you might all be asking yourself, Alex, why do you look like you're ready to attend Easter church service? Well, I tried to look as nurtury as possible. This is my most nurture style outfit. Part of the goal of this video is that hopefully by the end of it, you'll understand what nurtury means because it's not really a word. So today I'm going to talk about Porter Robinson. I'm going to talk about his new album, Nurture, but I also want to start off by talking a little bit about his musical journey to this point, what his music has meant to me in the past, as well as what it means to me today. So it's not really specifically an album review. I don't see myself giving Nurture a score out of 10 or anything like that. So I'm just gonna be talking about some music that I really like. My videos can get really rambly and kind of scattered quickly. So I did write down one whole page of notes torn out of a notebook like an insane person. So for anyone who doesn't know much about Porter Robinson, who is this guy? What's his deal? What's his music like? What's brought him to this point where he's releasing Nurture now? He's definitely a darling of the EDM scene, or the electronic dance music scene. He started out kind of right when electronic dance music was hitting the mainstream, where DJs were headlining festivals more and more. And when he started out, he was really young. I think he was like 16 or 17, starting out making electronic, like electro and dubstep-y kind of music. As far as early 2010s EDM goes, his music was always great. He's got a real penchant for writing hooks that stick in your head, very competently produced. He's always been really good at electronic music production. And he was headlining festivals really early. Ooh, that was nice. He started experiencing a lot of anxiety about the direction his career was taking. I'm not speaking out of turn with that. He's stated this multiple times in lots of interviews that he really likes that kind of heavy, either dubstep or electro music with emphasis on big, heavy sound design and crunchy bass. I think he still appreciates that music to an extent, but he felt himself kind of constrained by that format. The first track he released that kind of gave an inkling as to where he wanted to take his music was called Language, and his hands were probably shaking when he saw it released to the public. It's still a very dancey track, but emphasis on beauty. It's very catchy at the same time, but it's got these big saw pads that are very orchestral, as well as kind of a very reverberated piano line over top of all the rest of the production. You listen to that track now, it still sounds very, very good. It doesn't sound too out of the ordinary in the modern dance landscape, but at the time when everything was about really heavy bass drops, I think it probably would have been a pretty bold move for someone like Porter, who could have kept releasing heavy electro and he would have been just fine. Now, that really melodic dance music always existed, but it definitely wasn't in the public eye the same way the dubstep was. Language was super well received by the dance community. If you go to a music festival, well, not now, but hopefully soon, right? You still hear DJs play it all the time. Still a super popular track. The next thing he released was an album called Worlds. It's an album that combines Porter's appreciation of electronic dance music production, big heavy kick drums, booming bass lines, compressed snare drums, very dancey feel, with his appreciation of kind of indie synth pop and pop songwriting sensibility. I remember reading reviews at the time that said, this isn't groundbreaking. This is kind of similar to the kind of synth pop such as MGMT and Passion Pit. They've got that kind of synthy dance style to it, and they've been out for years at this point. I don't think saying that he's kind of copying that gives that album enough credit. I think it's more valuable to look at it from within the context of the EDM scene, which kind of stays somewhat separate from the rest of pop songwriting and whatnot, or at least it was at the time. That album still has a very big sound to it. You play it on a loud sound system and the bass just hits you very hard. There's not as many dynamics to it. It's pretty heavily compressed, makes full use of the EQ spectrum, but it still does have that kind of indie pop songwriting sensibility to it. with more emphasis on pop songwriting and emotions and making music that feels big and grandiose in some sense and beautiful. Porter's always had an emphasis on beauty in a lot of his music. As far as the dance music scene goes, after Worlds, the floodgates were open. Festivals at the time were about Skrillex and, the heavy dubsteppy music, and that bass scene still exists to this day, but from after Worlds, DJs were ready to experiment with more emotional songwriting in their tracks. There are a ton of big name DJs and electronic artists who are headlining music festivals who have very bassy dance music that is also informed by beauty and emotion. And those guys kind of came along after hearing Worlds. I'm not saying that musicians like that wouldn't have eventually broke through, but I'm just saying after the release of Worlds, the floodgates for a variety of dance music were open a lot more than they were at the time. So is it an influential album in terms of all albums of all time? I don't know if that's fair to say. It was very influential at the time in the dance music scene. Another thing that was a big about Worlds was the accompanying Worlds tour. Porter had a vision for the album. He wanted it to instill a sense of certain emotions and themes to it, and he brought that over into his live show. He put a lot of work into the visuals and just the feel of the atmosphere there. I hate to say this, I'm not knocking people who do this, but for some DJs, they don't have to put a ton of thought into their live show. You can get away with just playing music, like basically DJing so simplistically that you could be playing an iPod and people will come dance. But you step into a World set by Porter Robinson and it felt like it was transporting you to this universe, and you step into this zone for 2 hours or however long the show goes, and you come out of it feeling just like eyes open to this amazing new experience. There's lots of artists who put a lot of effort into their live shows to this day, and I don't know, I think Porter had a hand in that. Anyways, that album came out 7 years ago now, so what does that make it? 2013? No, 2014. It came out in 2014. Between Worlds and now, he did release a track with his friend Madian, who's another electronic producer. They made Shelter. Really good track that combines Porter's kind of beautiful electronic and poppy songwriting sensibility with Madian's own style. They combine in a really noticeable way. Like, that track is very much Porter and Madian. It doesn't feel like either of them just took the reins on it and the other one cashed a check. Porter also released Virtual Self, an EP under a different pseudonym, which is kind of an homage to very early electronic, garage, jungle, bass, early 90s rave scene, as well as the internet at that time, which was very aloof and mysterious. For anyone who wasn't really there for the internet in the 90s, it was very much more of a Wild West than it is now. I mean, when you're browsing the internet now, you go to Facebook, you go to Instagram, you go to Reddit. There's these very curated pages. In the past, you'd stumble upon these very strange fan websites and stuff, and it'd be like black background screen with red text, and there'd be an audio player in the corner playing some kind of weird garage music you've never heard of, and you stumble upon sites and you're like, what's going on here? Am I getting a virus right now? This is a simplification of what Virtual Self is, but it is very much a celebration of that era of music where people are releasing electronic ravey music over this very strange space that is the internet at the time. I mean, for a kid like Porter Robinson, who was like 12 in the 90s, to be listening to this ravey music is a testament to, well, the value of the internet. For anyone who grew up in the 90s and they haven't heard the Virtual Self EP, go listen to it and tell me that it doesn't sound like LimeWire the album. If you don't understand that joke, then you're very young. And now, a full 7 years later, after the release of Worlds, Porter Robinson releases another album under his name and not a pseudonym. It is called Nurture, and how is it? I mean, the fact that I'm making this video is probably testament to the fact that I like it. I want to preface the discussion of Nurture a little bit, and I know it's taken a while to get to this point in the video, but I just want to say, I want to start off by discarding any criticisms of this album that start with saying it's boring or not dancey enough or not enough epic sound design. With the Worlds album, that album and that show did largely attract the EDM audience space. It didn't cross over to mainstream pop too much, as far as I could tell myself. And at the time, if people were listening to Porter's Spitfire EP, which was an electro EP of his, and then they listened to Worlds and they didn't like it, that's a fair criticism. It's a pretty big step. But as far as saying this album's not heavy enough or not dancey enough, I think it's been pretty clear for a long time the kind of music that Porter's been wanting to head towards. I mean, he's made Virtual Self music under a different pseudonym. He still has appreciation for the dance music scene, but it's been clear for a very long time that Nurture was not going to be that. It's going to head in a more songwriting direction with emphasis on emotion and writing lyrics and pop songwriting sensibilities. If you don't like that and you're not as much of a fan of Porter Robinson anymore because of it, I don't think that's unreasonable. I just don't think it's fair to criticize an album on something that it was never going to be. I also just want to say this is not going to be an unbiased discussion. If it's not obvious by this point in the video, I'm a pretty big fan of Porter Robinson. I was huge into him in high school and my bachelor's degree. The first show of the Worlds tour was probably one of the first live shows I saw. Definitely the first one I feel like I saw outside of my hometown. I went to Vancouver for it, and it was the first show in the Worlds tour, and it was big for me. I actually met Porter Robinson, so I'll put the photo up now. There's me looking dorky and excited, and I was both of those things at the time, as well as a kind of awkward, younger looking Porter, and then Giraffage, who opened for him. Just as an aside, Charlie, who is Giraffage, is actually like the nicest man alive. I was just chatting with him kind of behind the venue, and like he came up to me and said hi and was talking and shook my hand and said, "I'm Charlie." And then I realized it was Giraffage. Like I thought he was just some nice dude. I wasn't going up to him to meet Giraffage, he just came to me. So Charlie, if you're out there, you made an impact, man, and I'm a big fan. Seen him like 3 or 4 times now. Anyways, I haven't listened to Porter or paid attention to his music for a very long time, but with the release of Nurture, I am right back in. He's hooked me, so this is not going to be an unbiased review. It just can't be. So with that said, how is Nurture? It's good. All right, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. No, it's really good. I enjoy it a lot. I'm not going to pretend it's a flawless masterpiece. I should also say that my enjoyment of the album, I tried to listen to it straight through and try to picture it how it is as an album, just listening to the album, not knowing much about Porter, and I think it's just too hard for me to say. I know Porter's career to this point, and he's said a lot about what Nurture is about and what it means to him, and I listened to all the singles on the lead up to the album, so I can't really talk about the album in a vacuum, uninformed by that context. Nurture is an album about Porter Robinson's journey as not only an artist, but as a person. He has admitted and expressed many times in the lead up to this album that after Worlds came out, he felt immense pressure to keep being Porter Robinson and release more critically acclaimed dance music. And he says that he tried for a very long time to write music and he hated everything he came up with. He sunk into a deep depression. It was a very dark place from him as far as it sounds like. And Nurture is an album that comes from the long process of discovering what it means to be alive, what fuels you, whether pressure of external success is going to drive you forward, but it's an album about how Porter Robinson learned to nurture himself, how to nurture his soul. It's a product of that process of life discovery, and it's also about that process. It does feel like a very personal journey to Porter. The production is a lot more intimate. There's a lot more actual instrumentation, meaning pianos, harps, orchestral instruments interspersed with the kind of bigger saw pad synths and electronic production. It's very clear on Nurture, and it's been clear his whole career, but specifically very clear at this point in time that Nurture is inspired and informed by the aspects of life that Porter appreciates greatly. It sounds like Porter's very motivated by a very specific style of uplifting chord progressions and beautiful melodies, and he brings that to Nurture. He's also a huge weeb. I think it's safe to say Porter's a big fan of Japanese culture, and a lot of the music that has inspired him is kind of the beautiful orchestral anime music. Now, because of that influence, it does bleed through very significantly on Nurture. It does kind of sound like anime openings and outros, the album. I'm not knocking it. I mean, there's tons of really good Japanese music that goes into the intros and outros of anime. I'm just saying that Porter brought that sensibility to this album. He does bring those kind of beautiful melodies and nature-inspired orchestral music and intersperses it with booming bass lines and pop songwriting and very dancey electronic music. It's a very interesting blend. It's also a very holistic album. There's a very clear vision for the kind of beauty that Porter wants to espouse on this album. So it's all very consistent. It's a good thing. I will say, you know, if you listen to the first 4 or 5 songs and you're not into it, you're probably not going to be into the rest of the album. That's not a bad thing. They really should just let Porter Robinson score an anime film at this point. He would do phenomenal at it. The songwriting on this album, in my opinion, is beautiful, and there's lots of points where I get goosebumps from the arrangements or even cry from the lyrics. I'm not going to pretend that this didn't hit me emotionally, because it definitely did, and this album stuck with me. And it will stick with me for a long time, I'm sure. Having said that, you cannot be cynical going into this album. You have to have an appreciation for a very specific style of beauty and emotion in songwriting. This album is syrupy sweet, but it is unabashedly sincere. And I think Porter gets away with it because he just seems like such a sincere guy. It feels very honest, and he seems very excited about this style of music, and his excitement for songwriting and for life comes through hugely on this album. Like I said, it's like honey dripping off your tongue sweet. There's not a sharpened or hardened rough ragged edge to the whole thing. So it's beautiful, but you have to be ready to go into it with sincerity. I'd like to talk about the vocals a little bit, because I have heard fans of Porter listen to Nurture and say that the vocal effects he uses irritate them. He uses a couple different vocal effects, probably more than I'm even picking up on as a pretty novice music producer, but he's pitch shifting his voice, but he's using a formant shifter, it's called. A formant shifter basically lets you pitch your voice up or down without actually changing the note that's being sang. He's pitching it way up, like several octaves high, and he's using the formant shifter in a way that it still kind of sounds like a girl singing. I don't know if that's his intent. I think he probably just thought it sounds really neat, but it sounds like a believable girl's voice. He also uses a fairly heavy amount of auto-tune at certain points. It's less obvious on some tracks, but he does auto-tune his voice. Auto-tune is something that I feel like I want to make a video ranting about it, because I feel like it gets unfairly maligned. He's using autotune in this album for effect. I mean, he can sing, but he's using it for effect more than anything. He likes the kind of robotic feel it lends to any track that he uses it on. And in that sense, I'm very much on the side of people who feel that autotune is a tool like any other musical instrument to create whatever style of music you want. I agree with that completely. Obviously, it can be used to make vocals sound better and kind of cheat at singing, but I don't think that's what Porter's doing here. I think he wants it for a specific effect. Very high-pitched, kind of girlish vocals appear many, many times on this album. He even sings duets with himself where he takes the effect off and he sings, and then himself singing but pitched up sings back. I know lots of people find this kind of vocal effect he uses annoying. I personally don't, so your mileage on the album will definitely vary depending on how much you can tolerate the vocal effect. I will say, I think it is slightly overused. It's a really cool effect. I like it a lot. I think it lends itself well to the style of electronic, dancey, video game and anime inspired, but sincere, beautiful music he's writing. That was like a really long run-on description of what this album's about, but I think the effect lends itself well. Having said that, I do think there are parts on the album that would have benefited from just hearing Porter's voice, especially since the journey in this album is a deeply personal one. It's It's an album about depression and artistic struggle and the pain of failing to create something that you feel is worthwhile and the joy of discovering your own joy for art again. And in that personal journey, I think it would have been nice to hear Porter just singing as he does a little more often. There's a couple tracks where he does not use vocal effects, and those were some of the standouts for me. One example of a song where it irked me the most is Blossom. So Blossom is a track that is very deeply personal and it's clear. It's just an acoustic guitar and Porter's voice, and he's singing to his girlfriend who he's been seeing for 4 years now. He's singing to the love of his life, and that comes through with the lyrics and the songwriting. It's a very emotional song. It's beautiful, touching, but he's singing with this high-pitched robotic girl voice. There's one part in the song where he drops that out and it's just him singing, and that's like my favorite part of the song. I think for a song that's so deeply personal, it would have been nice to just have Porter and the guitar. It would have been a really nice change of pace and like a breath of fresh air from the rest of the album as well, which is very heavily produced at times. I think Porter feels that this new pitched up kind of vocal effect is a sincere part of his artistic identity, and if that's the way he wants to go, that's fine. Like I said, it doesn't bother me. I think it sounds good a lot of the time, but I'm very happy to hear Porter himself, just Porter's voice. I don't know if he's insecure about his voice. I hope not. Like, he sings very competently. Like, he's a really good singer, and his voice has a really interesting tone to it. I just would have liked to hear more of that. The closer of the album, Trying to Feel Alive, is one of my favorite tracks purely because he doesn't use any vocal effects on it, and the lyrics of that song are a very personal journey as well, and it just comes together really nicely. Anyways, that's my commentary on the vocals. They don't bother me. I like them. I think they're very creative, and I think they work in a lot of places on this album. I do think they were a touch overused. I'd like to talk about audio production. Like I said earlier in this video, Porter Robinson is a very competent, very talented electronic music producer. As far as I understand, all the audio production and mixing on this album are all him. And a lot of the tracks on this album do some very creative things with effects on a computer that could not be done with traditional instrumentation. Dull Scythe is one track that is very clearly just like electronic music. It feels like he just threw a PC into a tumble dryer and turned the thing on in the best way. And then there are also tracks that use more traditional instrumentation to great effect. There were a few parts of the album that I thought felt a little weird with the mixing and mastering. I don't know who's at fault, because I'm assuming he had mastering engineers for this, but I just noticed between a couple of the louder and quieter songs, like I think the first 3 or 4 tracks at the beginning of the album, I kept having to adjust my this is my car's volume. So a song would be really quiet, I'd turn it up, and then it'd be way too loud. And that's not a bad thing. Those are dynamics, but I think there's probably more of a balance he maybe could have struck based on my very limited understanding of audio engineering. I don't think he had to compress everything completely so it's just this big, loud block of music, but it's weird to me that you have to adjust the volume so much. Anyways, the distortion is also used very interestingly, but there's parts where songs sound a little bit muddy to me, like a little bit crunchy in a way it's hard to discern what's going on. Mother is a song that is beautiful, but the actual mixing on it sounds a little bit cluttered to me, personally. There's lots of songs on this album that are very complex and electronic and lots of cool effects going on, and they sound great coming through the speakers. So I know Porter is capable of making something very complex and densely layered and still having it sound great. I just know that Mother is one specific instance where, yeah, it was kind of hard to even tell what's going on at certain parts of the song, so. Oh man, I am going to have a sunburn. I'm going to. Can you overdose on vitamin D? Okay, so I wrote music about writing music. Yeah, this was worrying me on the lead up to the album. So this album is about Porter's journey from massive success of Worlds to feeling pressure to write more music, to not even know whether he's capable of writing music that he likes anymore, to finding what he likes about life and using that to inform music going forward and to regain his love of songwriting. I think that is a sentiment that is applicable to lots of artistic endeavors. I mean, the creative journey is a very up and down one. If you're writing music or writing books or painting, there's a lot of struggles that come with making something, not knowing whether you're getting better, not knowing whether you'll ever make something you like ever again. There's a lot to that. All of these singles on the lead up to this album, they're all about that journey, and I was slightly concerned that this was going to be an album about writing an album, which felt, I don't know, I didn't need a full album of that. Every song is kind of about that, but they're not necessarily about different points in that artistic journey. It's not laid out like a, you know, an operatic or a concept album where it takes along one journey. And I was worried that with the album, I would feel like, okay, I get it. I am pleased to say that Porter did write about other things on this album. I mean, he's got Mother, which, as much as I just complained about the mixing on that song, it's a song about how much he loves and cherishes his mother. We love to see it. We love to see a boy who loves his mom, okay? And then Sweet Time and Blossom are about the love he has for his current girlfriend and how she helped him out of his depression and just how much she means to him. Those three songs were very welcome breaks from songs about songwriting, which is a simplification. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but I'm just saying, for an album about what it means to nurture yourself and nurture your soul and to find why you live, I was hoping that he would have more subjects than just songwriting, because I'm assuming Porter is a well-rounded person beyond his music. I know music's a big part of his life, but I was really hoping that there would be more emotions expressed besides just his artistic journey, which there are. So this is just such an aside that doesn't matter that much, but I'm just saying I'm happy with the range of songwriting. I'm very curious to see what he's going to write about after this album. I'm trying to think of what else I can say about Nurture. I've got the entire track list written down here. I guess I'll say I want to give the album proper credit in the sense that when I first listened to it a couple times, I was worried that the best songs and the songs that I will listen to on repeat were all the singles, and all the singles are phenomenal, but there are some songs that were not released before the album that are also fantastic. I would say pretty much every song on the album I will listen to happily. I mean, there's some that work best in the context of the album. Wind Tempos is this really long orchestral piece that feels like you're laying in a field with the breeze blowing on you, and it works really great as kind of a quieter, gentler part of the album between some kind of bigger dancey numbers. But I happily listen to it on its own all the time. There's a couple that I probably wouldn't listen to unless I was going for a full album listen. I'm not going to tell you what those are because it doesn't matter. It's just personal opinion. I think every single song on this track list that I'm looking at here, they've all been stuck in my head at some point. Lots of them hit me emotionally the first time through and on multiple repeat listens. It's a very, very well made, very well thought through electronic album that also has more personal songwriting sensibilities to it. So I think whereas Worlds didn't really break through from the electronic dance scene into more poppy space, I think Nurture, you could listen to it as someone who doesn't really know anything about dance music, and I think you would enjoy it, assuming that this kind of really poppy, beautiful songwriting is your jam. Because, like I said, if you listen to the first 4 tracks and you're not into it at that point, I don't think the rest of it's going to change your mind. But yeah, really, really love the album. It's been on repeat a lot lately. I guess I want to end this video really quickly by talking about, well, okay, how do I explain this? I did say I can't review this album unbiased. I also can't really talk about it outside of the greater context of what Porter's trying to achieve at this point in his artistic career. What do I mean by that? Well, the album self-contained, I think, is a very good pop album. Once you bring in the context of his artistic journey to this point, I think it's very triumphant. I think it's a really phenomenal return to form for him. And then once you factor in all the cool artistic endeavors that Porter is bringing along with this album, it's just like just so good. Because we're in this pandemic nightmare, Porter recently had a virtual music festival called Secret Sky, where he got lots of cool electronic and, well, a lot of his favorite artists to stream live sets which is not brand new for this pandemic world we live in, but they streamed within the context of a virtual world. You logged in and you had a little character and you run around and you could talk to people all around the world. I can't actually put into words how special that experience was for me. I came home from work and I forgot it was even going on. I logged in and I stayed several hours, like the rest of the festival that I could possibly watch. It gave me the same feeling of longing and nostalgia afterwards, and like joy that I got to experience that an in-person music festival does. Meeting people and just chatting with them from around the world and being able to see above their characters where they're from was so cool, and it added this super cool extra layer to just listening to music online. And I'm in Discord chat with people that I hung out with on Secret Sky, who live in different parts of the States and even in Australia, and we all chat on Discord now. Shouts out to voidgang. So that was really special. I thought it was amazing that Porter closed that virtual festival with a high quality live stream of his new live show, which he will be playing live once we're allowed to do that again. He's never really released like official footage like that of his live show, and he did that during the pandemic. And for like a virtual festival, he put so much effort into the production of this thing. I'll link to it somewhere. You can see the whole live set. Honestly, like if I'm gonna recommend this album to people, which I am, I also recommend going and checking out the live show afterwards, because for someone like Porter who appreciates not just music, but how music can affect a person's emotions in the context of a live space and in the context of accompanying visuals, he's put so much thought into this show, and it is so much more than just DJing. Producing music is hard. When people say that, oh, making a dance track's easy, I don't think that's reasonable a lot of the time. I think there's a lot of very talented music producers out there. But there's also a lot of very talented music producers who then do a live show where they make their money and they just DJ to the bare minimum. Beat matching is done for you on the computer. There's lots of cool things you can do with DJing, but you don't have to, is the unfortunate reality of the current live landscape. Artists like Porter are trying to change that, and not necessarily for the sake of the EDM community, but I think he loves electronic music and he sees the potential that it has for songwriting. And I think he also sees the potential to bring electronic music into a live space and to program amazing visuals with it, and to, launch samples on the fly. He plays piano, he sings, he's got vocal effects going live. It's quite the experience, and it's something that I recommend you check out. If you come away from it saying, a lot of it's still pre-programmed and he's auto-tuned on it, he doesn't have to sing very well, that's all fair, but I think you have to look at it as an experience and like as a showcase of Porter's creativity and his talent for creating this amazing experience. I think it's phenomenal. So with that said, I'm very excited for the day that I will be able to see Nurture, the live show. I don't know when that will be, unfortunately, but yeah. That's all I have written down. I guess I didn't really review Nurture. I hope it's clear that I really love the album. I think there's a lot of beautiful emotion. I think there's a lot of joy to be found in this creation that Porter's made. I have my little criticisms that I went into a little bit, but this is the first album in a while that I'm listening to on repeat and thinking about a lot. It's hard to chalk all of that up to just the album Nurture, because Porter means a lot to me. He always has, and Secret Sky was like one of my favorite experiences of 2021 so far. The live set he played on there, I go back to it on YouTube quite often, and it's just so special to me. I don't think I can divorce myself from that. But yeah, that's my recommendation. Go listen to Nurture by Porter Robinson, and then go sit in a big grassy field, and then listen to it in a big grassy field. And yeah, go love life. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. It means so much to me that anyone cares enough about this channel to watch any of this. For anyone who listened to Nurture and likes Porter Robinson, or anyone who's listening to Nurture for the first time, tell me what you thought of it. Tell me if what I'm saying about the album is fair. Did you go to Secret Sky? What did you think? What do you think of the live set? Yeah, tell me about what kind of videos you want to see from me in the future. Tell me about your day, and I will read it. That's it. That's all. Thank you so much. Oh, I almost hit the stand. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Whew. Now I gotta go edit this thing.